Get her out. We don't let black women touch money that isn't theirs. Douglas Wade's voice cut through the bank lobby like a hammer against glass. The words weren't private. They were aimed to bruise, to brand, to humiliate. Every head in the room snapped toward the counter. Daniela Rivera, balancing her stroller, gasped aloud. Graham Ellis, crisp in his pinstriped suit, smirked as though he had been waiting his entire life for a moment like this. In the center of it all stood Eliza Hart. She didn't flinch, didn't raise her voice. One hand rested on a slim laptop case, her eyes steady, her posture calm in a storm designed to unravel her. She probably found that card on the street. One teller whispered, "Too loud to be an accident." Another clerk leaned in, voice thick with disdain. "They always try this scam. Pretend to be someone important." The accusations floated like daggers, finding their mark in every corner of the lobby. Customers shifted, murmured, judged. Eliza's stillness seemed to sharpen the edges of the room. She had been here before, not in this exact building, not under these exact lights, but in countless rooms where her presence had been recast as suspicion, her success repainted as fraud. Andrew Keene, the assistant manager, didn't bother to hide his sneer. "We've seen this play out before. They think calm means convincing." Marcus Bell, standing in line near the tellers, raised his phone. The red recording light glowed. His jaw tightened as he whispered, "This is wrong." Beside him, an older man muttered, "They're protecting the bank," his words dismissive, rehearsed. Douglas leaned closer, his breath carrying the sharpness of arrogance. "Do you think we don't see through this? People like you never walk in here with clean money." "Security." His order cracked like a whip. Pete Laramie, the guard by the door, touched the radio at his shoulder. His shoes scraped across the tile as he started forward, shoulders squared. The tension in the air turned thick enough to taste. Daniela Rivera pressed a hand to her mouth, her child shifting restlessly in the stroller. Eliza didn't shrink. She pressed her palms flat against the polished counter, her fingers steady, her silence louder than the insults being lobbed in her direction. Douglas barked again, each syllable sharp. "Remove her now. She is trespassing in a private client area." A teller laughed under her breath. "Look at her shoes. Not even designer." Another leaned closer, whispering just loud enough. Fraudsters always try to act calm. Their words weren't hidden. They were weapons, tossed openly into the crowd, meant to stitch a single story into everyone's mind. Eliza Hart did not belong here. But she didn't move. She lifted her laptop case, set it gently on the counter, and with a quiet motion tapped the screen awake. The glow washed across her face, soft against the hard fluorescence above. The lobby seemed to pause, every eye watching, waiting for what would come next. Douglas Wade sneered, his voice slicing through the quiet. "Do you think that toy will save you? I've seen this before. People like you show up with fake documents, fake names, fake wealth." He swept a hand toward the watching crowd, inviting them into his judgment. Graham Ellis, sharp in his pinstriped suit, gave a slow nod of approval. "Exactly," he muttered, loud enough to be heard. "They don't earn it the right way." Marcus Bell, phone steady in his grip, leaned toward Daniela Rivera, who held her child close. "This is what they do to us," he whispered. "Humiliate first, ask questions later." Daniela frowned, her eyes locked on Eliza. "They don't even care who she is," she said softly. "They already decided." Pete Laramie, the guard, stepped closer. His hand hovered inches from Eliza's arm. "Ma'am, you need to come with me." His voice was flat, all procedure, but his eyes flickered with hesitation. Eliza lifted her gaze and met his with a calm steadiness that cut through the air. "Do not touch me." The words were low, firm, impossible to ignore. Pete froze mid-motion, caught between command and conscience. Douglas slammed his palm against the counter, the crack reverberating across the lobby. "You see? Defiant. This is exactly the type we deal with every week. Call the police. Let them take her out in handcuffs." A ripple of gasps broke loose. A young woman clutching her purse near the line whispered, "This is going too far." More phones tilted upward, recording the unfolding spectacle. A man by the corner leaned into his partner, voice urgent. "I think she's someone important." The words passed like sparks through the crowd, doubt beginning to coil through curiosity. Andrew Keene stormed from his glass-walled office, his tie crooked, his face flushed with authority. He raised his voice with a sharp edge. "I'm in charge here, and I will not let a woman like you manipulate my staff." His finger jabbed toward Eliza's laptop with open disdain. "Close that device right now. Fraudsters don't get to stage performances in this bank." By the coffee station, a man shook his head. He didn't even ask her name. Another answered bitterly, "They don't need it. They've already written her story." The tension thickened. Eliza's hands remained flat on the counter, steady, her posture still as stone. She didn't plead, didn't raise her voice. She let their accusations stack on top of each other, their weight pressing against the silence she refused to surrender. Douglas snatched her bank card from the counter and slammed it down again with a force that echoed. "This is confiscated until law enforcement verifies it. You have no right to claim millions in this account." The word millions electrified the room. Heads turned, whispers sharpened into open suspicion. A woman in a tailored blue suit scoffed. "There's no way she has that kind of money. Look at her clothes." A man nearby added with venom, "I work 3 jobs and don't dress that plain." "She's lying." Eliza blinked once, the quiet behind her eyes deeper than the noise circling around her. Memories rose unbidden. 25 years old, sitting in her car outside another bank, tears streaming after being told her deposit was suspicious. Not because she doubted herself, but because she knew this day would come again. And here it was. Pete's radio crackled to life. "Unit 2, proceed to the lobby." The words landed like a gavel. Police were on their way. Gasps rippled, murmurs swelled, and the crowd pressed closer, caught between outrage and spectacle. The lobby had become a stage, and Eliza Hart, silent and unyielding, stood at its center as the storm gathered around her. "They're calling the cops on her for existing." The words slipped out of Marcus Bell's mouth, his phone trembling as he filmed. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried enough to make heads turn. Andrew Keene folded his arms, a smile tugging at his lips. "Your little performance ends here," he said, dripping with confidence. "We protect this institution from people like you." Every syllable landed with the certainty of a man convinced he had already won. Eliza Hart finally moved. Not backward, not in retreat, just a slow, deliberate motion as she reached for her phone. She pressed a single contact, her voice calm but cutting. "Begin documentation." Every word, every action, every face. "Timestamp now." The effect was immediate. The lobby stilled. The buzz of whispers quieted, replaced by the sharp hum of uncertainty. Phones already raised in the crowd tilted higher. Authority no longer stood unchallenged. It was shifting. Her phone glowed in her hand as she repeated, "Begin documentation." From the speaker, a clear female voice responded, crisp enough for those nearest to hear. "Confirmed. Recording active. Internal system linked to headquarters. All dialogue is being transcribed in real time." The words bent the room. Eyes darted. A woman near the coffee station whispered, "Headquarters?" Another customer leaned forward, curiosity replacing passive silence. For the first time, the balance of power tilted away from the men behind the counter. But Douglas Wade's smirk only deepened. "You think a phone call frightens me? We've dealt with fake lawyers, fake consultants, fake executives. You're no different." Andrew nodded sharply beside him. "Look at her," he said, pointing toward Eliza's pressed white blouse and modest shoes. "She walks in here dressed like she just left a discount store and expects us to believe she's a millionaire client. Impossible." His voice cut toward Pete Laramie. "Escort her out. Police will finish this." Pete moved forward again, his hand near her arm, his radio still live in the other. But his steps slowed. His shoulders betrayed hesitation. Eliza lifted her gaze, her voice cold steel. "If you touch me, this bank will pay for it." The sentence landed like a blade. Pete froze. His grip on the radio loosened, his jaw tightening with indecision. From the line, a voice rose, a young woman clutching her purse. "She gave you her identification. She gave you her card. You ignored both. This isn't policy. It's profiling." The crowd stirred. Heads turned. The woman's cheeks flushed under the sudden attention, but her voice didn't waver. "I checked in earlier today for my appointment. I saw her name in the system. She had a meeting reserved. It was valid." Gasps followed, sharp and quick. For the first time, a visible crack fractured the wall of authority Douglas had built. Eliza remained still, her hands folded lightly over her laptop case, her expression unreadable but unbroken. Inside, another memory stirred. 16 years old, told to wait outside a hotel lobby in Charlotte because only guests were allowed indoors. Escorted to the sidewalk as if she were nothing. The sting of that dismissal pressed into this moment, fueling the armor of silence she wore now. Douglas slammed his palm against the counter, each strike an attempt to reclaim the ground slipping beneath him. "Enough. This woman is a fraud, and I will prove it. She does not belong in this lobby. She does not belong in this bank. She does not belong in our system." His voice thundered, desperate, each word trying to nail the verdict into place. But doubt had already taken root. Customers shifted uneasily. Phones stayed raised, the red lights blinking their silent rebellion. Pete Laramie did not advance. And Eliza's command, "Document everything," hung in the air like a siren no one could shut off. The tide had started to shift, though the staff behind the counters were too wrapped in their own authority to see it. A tall man in a tailored navy suit emerged from the glass offices, his presence commanding in a way that silenced even the tellers. Richard Halston, the regional director, the figure every employee dreaded more than any audit, strode forward with finality in his step. His voice cracked across the lobby before he even reached the counter. "This has gone on long enough. Remove her immediately. She is contaminating the integrity of this branch." The atmosphere hardened. Customers who had been whispering drew back into silence, their eyes darting between Eliza Hart and the man who spoke as if his authority could not be questioned. Halston turned toward them with a cold, performative smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, fraud is never tolerated at Jefferson National Bank. We will not allow one pretender to jeopardize decades of trust." Eliza didn't rise. She didn't even flinch. Her hands rested on the counter, steady, and her silence carried more weight than his speech. It wasn't weakness, it was gravity, pulling every gaze back to her. Slowly, she lifted her phone. The glow lit her face as her assistant's voice came clearly through the speaker. "Documentation confirmed. Audio captured. Video stream synchronized. Headquarters is watching." A wave of unease cut through the room. Halston scoffed loudly, trying to drown it out. "Headquarters? That's the oldest bluff in the book. Say something big, make the crowd hesitate. Do you really think anyone here believes you hold a connection above this branch?" He leaned closer, his cologne sharp, his disdain sharper. "You don't even belong in first-class banking. Look at you. The idea is laughable." Near the teller line, Marcus Bell whispered to his friend while his phone stayed raised. "She hasn't shouted once. Not a word of anger. That's real power." The red recording light blinked like a beacon. Halston's gaze snapped toward him. "Turn that device off. You are interfering in an internal matter." His tone was an order, but Marcus didn't lower his phone. Instead, a middle-aged woman across the lobby lifted her own and said firmly, "No, we'll keep filming. The public deserves to see this." The director's face flushed. His authority was being tested openly now. "Guard," he snapped, his voice breaking with heat. "Do your job. Remove her this instant or hand me your badge." Pete Laramie froze mid-step. His hand hovered near Eliza's arm, but his body wouldn't move forward. He stood locked between the order of his superior and the undeniable presence radiating from Eliza's quiet defiance. At last, Eliza lifted her chin. Her voice was measured, deliberate, each word edged with steel. You are not defending integrity. You are exposing bias. Every word spoken here is documented. Every insult, every action, every decision. Nothing will disappear. The crowd stirred at her words. Whispers swelled louder, carrying on like sparks in dry grass. A man near the coffee station murmured, "She sounds like someone who knows exactly what she's doing." Halston slammed his palm against the counter, his desperation cracking through the facade of control. You are nothing. When the police arrive, you will leave this bank in handcuffs. Eliza's eyes never blinked. Her reply was quiet, but resonant enough to pierce the air. The police will not decide your fate today. Headquarters will. Something shifted then, visible and immediate. For the first time, it wasn't her credibility under fire, it was his. The hierarchy that had ruled the lobby minutes before was unraveling, replaced by a storm she had allowed to gather in silence. Halston's fist still rested on the counter when a new sound shattered the tension. Dozens of phones chimed at once, a chorus of alerts sweeping through the lobby. Screens lit up in every direction. A woman near the teller line gasped as she looked down. It's trending already. Another man lifted his phone higher, disbelief widening his eyes. People are streaming it live. The whole city's watching. The director's jaw tightened. His face hardened, but his voice cracked under the weight pressing in from every corner. Nonsense. These little videos mean nothing. Richard Halston's words fell flat, the confidence in his voice gone. Authority bled out of him as the lobby filled with the glow of phones, screens raised like a constellation of witnesses. Eliza Hart stayed perfectly composed. She reached for her phone again, her tone precise. Proceed to escalation. Mark every reference to race or appearance. Her assistant's voice came back, crisp and unwavering. Logged and confirmed. Headquarters Ethics Board has been notified. Live transcript streaming to corporate. Gasps broke through the crowd. Pete Laramie shifted uneasily, his radio lowered. Halston's eyes darted toward his staff, searching for loyalty, but none answered. A teller finally cracked the silence, her voice shaking as she spoke loud enough for the lobby to hear. She's telling the truth. I saw her name in the system this morning, executive level. I ignored it. I didn't want to get involved. Her face flushed with shame. Halston snapped at her, his voice sharp. Quiet. You'll lose your position if you spread lies. But it was too late. The words had landed. Customers turned toward Eliza, the weight of skepticism shifting toward belief. Daniela Rivera, clutching her child to her chest, raised her voice. I watched you call her a thief before she said a single word. That's not policy. That's discrimination. The accusation struck harder than any paper document. Halston jabbed a finger at her, his composure cracking. You don't understand how banking works. We protect our clients. A voice rose from the back, steady and firm. Protect? I've banked here 20 years. I've never once seen you treat a white man like this. The lobby stirred. Whispers turned to open voices, phones recording every angle. Pete lowered his radio completely, uncertainty etched across his face. Eliza leaned forward slightly, her calm cutting through the rising noise. You accused me before verifying a single fact. You judged me by my clothes, by my skin, by my silence. And now every word you spoke is no longer yours. It belongs to the record. The crowd hummed, the sound of murmurs growing louder, like sparks snapping through dry brush. Halston tried to regain the floor. Enough. She is a fraud, and I will not. But his words stumbled as the lobby's voices rose against him. Some angry, some protective, none obedient. The storm had broken, and Eliza no longer stood alone. The witnesses had become her chorus. Their voices carried the weight of truth. Halston's face reddened. He tried again, louder, as if volume could replace proof. Security, detain her now. She is obstructing operations. She is a threat. His words bounced off marble, but fell hollow. Pete hesitated, his hand hovering near Eliza's arm, but never closing the gap. His voice cracked with conflict. Sir, she hasn't raised her voice. She hasn't broken a law. Halston snapped, his authority unraveling. Do as I say, or hand me your badge. The ultimatum hung heavy in the air. Before Pete could respond, Douglas Wade lunged forward. He snatched Eliza's laptop case from the counter, ripping it open and raising it high like contraband. See? Nothing but props. Another trick to fool us. The crowd erupted in gasps. A man shouted, That's theft. She didn't give you permission. Marcus Bell stepped closer, his phone still recording, his voice steady as steel. You just destroyed the last shred of credibility you had. Douglas flung the laptop aside. It crashed across the tile, the sound echoing louder than his accusations. Eliza didn't move. She turned her eyes toward him slowly, her expression unreadable, her silence sharper than any words. Andrew Keene seized the moment, pointing at the broken device. If she were real, she'd have nothing to hide. Instead, she brings fake tools and fake wealth. The claim floated in the charged air, but the weight of judgment no longer tilted his way. All eyes turned back to Eliza, and the silence she held grew heavier than the noise around her. Douglas Wade folded his arms, smug in his certainty. Eliza Hart's voice returned at last, quiet but cutting through the air. You just tampered with corporate property. That act alone will cost you more than your position. The words stopped the room cold. Douglas gave a shaky laugh, trying to mask his unease. Empty threats. You can't scare me with a performance. But his denial didn't land the way he hoped. Whispers passed through the lobby like wind through glass. A woman near the doors murmured, She sounds too certain. Another customer added, No one holds steady like that unless they know something we don't. Douglas's superior, the regional director Halston, tried to steady the ground beneath them. He raised his voice again, desperate. The police will be here any moment. This farce will end with her in cuffs. But the crowd no longer believed him. The buzz of conversation grew, voices no longer controlled by the bank's authority. Eliza's phone vibrated once in her palm. She lifted it slowly, her tone even. Escalation complete. Forward the live stream to the compliance board. Flag every staff member involved. Her assistant's voice came clear and unflinching. Confirmed. Headquarters is monitoring. Silence will not shield them. Halston's face drained of color. For the first time, doubt cracked his composure. Around him, staff shifted nervously, their posture betraying guilt. Customers leaned forward with their cameras, no longer recording Eliza's ordeal, but the unraveling of those who had tried to brand her an imposter. The marble lobby no longer resembled a place of business. It felt like a courtroom, every biased word already entered into evidence. Eliza hadn't raised her voice once, yet the silence she left after each sentence pressed heavy on every employee who had mocked her. Douglas tugged at his cufflinks. Andrew Keene's smirk faltered. Even Pete Laramie took an uneasy step back. Eliza rose slowly, deliberately. Every motion carried the weight of authority. She scanned the room, her gaze sweeping across staff, customers, and security alike. You put me on trial without a single fact, she said evenly. Now the record will judge you. Pete froze. He had been ordered to act, but her words anchored him more firmly than any command from above. The customers whispered openly now, some in disgust at the staff, others in awe of Eliza's composure. With a single tap of her phone, Eliza shifted the balance again. Activate internal verification, she instructed. Her assistant responded immediately. Verification engaged. Cross-checking ownership through corporate database. Gasps rippled across the lobby. Halston's jaw tightened as though trying to grind the moment into dust. Theater, he barked. Smoke and mirrors. She's bluffing. But no one echoed him. The eyes of the room were fixed on Eliza. Her words carried forward, steady. In less than 60 seconds, the system will confirm who I am. And when it does, every insult you spoke will not vanish into the air. They will be logged as liabilities. Douglas tried to seize the air back, shouting, "Lies. All of it." But the conviction had bled from his voice. The force he had wielded earlier was gone. A customer near the counter muttered just loud enough to be heard. If she were lying, why is she so calm? Then a chime sounded from Eliza's phone. Her assistant's voice delivered the blow. Verification complete. Ownership confirmed. Eliza Hart, Chief Executive Officer, Hart Financial Group, parent company of Grant National Bank. Silence fell so heavy it seemed to still the air. No one whispered. No one laughed. Halston's face went pale, drained of all certainty. And in the hush that followed, the truth settled on every corner of the lobby. Eliza Hart had never been the intruder. She was the one who owned the walls around them. Douglas Wade's eyes went wide, his lips parted, but no words followed. Andrew Keene shook his head in disbelief, as if he could will away the truth staring him down. Eliza Hart's voice cut through the marble silence, sharp and final. You measured me by skin, by clothing, by quiet. You branded me a thief in the very bank I own. The pause that followed felt like a gavel striking. Then came her verdict. That was your last mistake. The lobby erupted, not in panic, but in applause. Phones lifted higher, recording the moment the weight of power shifted. Staff who had sneered minutes earlier now looked hollow, as if the floor had vanished beneath them. Eliza stood steady, her calm no longer mistaken for weakness. It was command. It was truth made undeniable. The revelation cracked like thunder. For a breath, the lobby stood frozen in stone silence. Then came the collapse. Halston, the regional director, sagged against the counter, his mouth moving without sound. Douglas, the branch manager who had ripped away Eliza's laptop, stumbled backward until he hit the wall, his eyes darting toward the exits like a man cornered. Eliza didn't rush. She didn't need to. Each step she took forward was measured, her composure radiating more force than any raised voice could. She reached the counter where her bank card lay bent and scuffed from abuse. Lifting it carefully, she held it between two fingers. You took what wasn't yours, she said evenly, her gaze fixed on Douglas. This card represents authority over every dollar that moves through this branch. And you thought it belonged to no one. Douglas stammered, his voice cracking. I didn't know. You didn't need to know. Her reply sliced through him. You decided the moment I walked through your door. Halston's voice rasped back to life, low and broken. This can't be real. But a man near the back counter spoke up, phone in hand. It's real. I just checked. She's listed as the CEO of Hart Financial, the company that owns this bank. The confirmation rippled outward. Murmurs gave way to gasps, then to spoken exclamations. Doubt evaporated, replaced by certainty. Eliza turned toward Andrew Keene, who had folded his arms so tight they trembled. You mocked me in front of every witness here. You accused me without evidence. Tell me, was that policy, or was that your choice? His mouth opened, but no excuse formed. Silence betrayed him more than any words could. Customers shook their heads, disgust plain on their faces, while phones zoomed in to capture his humiliation. Eliza's assistant's voice came again through the phone in her hand. Corporate compliance has flagged all involved. Access credentials under review. Disciplinary orders pending. The words drained the last trace of color from the staff. Halston's voice shrank to a whisper. Please, we can make this right. But Eliza didn't soften. She didn't smile. She let the weight of their fears sit heavy across the polished floor. This lobby belongs to me, she said at last. The words were not loud, yet they cut sharper than any order. Applause surged again. Some customers cheered. Others raised their phones higher to preserve the moment when humiliation turned into reckoning, when silence became power. And the staff, who had believed their authority unshakable, were no longer the judges. They were the accused. The air cracked wide open, and nothing in that branch would ever return to the way it had been before Eliza Hart spoke. Fear rippled through the staff, spreading faster than words could catch it. Douglas Wade's lips trembled as he whispered, almost to himself, She owns the bank." His voice was barely audible, yet the marble lobby carried it to every corner. Customers who had wavered earlier now shifted firmly against the staff. A woman in a red blazer shook her head, her voice sharp with disgust. "You humiliated her. You called her a thief. And all along, she was the chief executive officer." Another man lifted his phone higher, his voice ringing with certainty. "This is going viral. The whole country will know how you treated her." Andrew Keene tried to step forward, his voice desperate, straining for authority he no longer held. "This is a misunderstanding. We thought she was a fraud. We were protecting the institution." But Eliza Hart's gaze cut him down before he could say more. Her words were steady, deliberate. "You were not protecting. You were projecting your prejudice. There is a difference." Halston, the regional director, looked stripped of his armor. His tie hung loose, his face pale, his shoulders hunched. He raised his hands halfway, a hollow gesture of surrender. "Ms. Hart," he said, voice unsteady, "perhaps we can resolve this quietly. There is no need for escalation." Eliza did not move closer. She didn't need to. Her voice carried across the lobby like a verdict. "You silenced truth with arrogance. You turned bias into policy. And now you ask for silence again. No, silence has already done enough damage." Pete Laramie, the guard once ordered to drag her out, lowered his radio completely. He took a small step back, his posture no longer aligned with the managers, but with the customers. His silence wasn't submission. It was recognition. A young woman holding her phone high broke the stillness. "I watched you call her a criminal before she even gave her name. That's not a mistake. That's who you are." The murmur that followed was different this time. Heavier. United. The staff who had mocked her earlier now stood cornered, exposed before the people they were supposed to serve. Andrew's shoulders sagged. Douglas rubbed his temples as if wishing he could erase the footage already spreading, and Halston's eyes darted nervously toward the lobby cameras. Then Eliza's phone chimed again, her assistant's voice crisp and unwavering. "Corporate compliance is awaiting your command. All personnel involved are flagged. Do you wish to proceed with removal?" Every head turned toward her, some pleading, others resigned. Eliza didn't rush. She didn't raise her voice. Her words fell like stone into still water. They will face consequences. Every insult, every abuse of authority, every theft of dignity. It will all be answered. The crowd erupted in applause. Not wild, but deliberate, rhythmic, like a verdict from a jury. Phones captured the trembling staff, the vindicated customers, and Eliza Hart standing calm at the center of it all. The bank had tried to strip her down. Instead, it had stripped itself bare. Eliza lifted her phone once more, her tone precise and unshaken. "Proceed with termination. Effective immediately. Revoke access for the regional director, the branch manager, and the assistant manager. Lock their credentials. Freeze their accounts." Her assistant's reply was immediate, clinical, final. "Confirmed. Executing removals now." A sharp electronic chime echoed from behind the counter. Halston's identification badge blinked red, then went dark. Douglas Wade's computer terminal locked in an instant, the screen flashing a warning, access denied by corporate authority. The sound of collapsing power was louder than any protest, and Eliza Hart hadn't needed to raise her voice once. Andrew Keene's login credentials blinked out one after another, dissolving on the locked terminal like vanishing ink. The tools he had once wielded with smug certainty, the screens, the systems, the access, were stripped from him in real time, leaving nothing but his own panic. Gasps broke through the lobby as the reality of what was happening settled over the marble floor. A woman pushing a stroller whispered, almost to herself, "She just shut them down." A man in a gray suit shook his head slowly, his voice thick with disbelief. I've never seen anything like this. Chaos rippled behind the counter. Douglas Wade slammed his palms against the frozen screen. No, no, this isn't possible. His voice cracked, desperate. Andrew waved his badge again and again against the scanner. Each swipe answered only by another cold red denial. The regional director, Halston, stood rigid, his face pale as stone. Please, Miss Hart, he stammered. His earlier bravado dissolved into pleading. This will ruin us. Eliza's voice was quiet, but its precision cut sharper than any shout. You ruined yourselves the moment you decided humiliation was easier than service. This isn't revenge. It's accountability. The words landed like a gavel. Customers erupted, clapping, some cheering, some nodding solemnly as if they had witnessed something sacred. Dozens of phones stayed high, recording the reversal. The men who had mocked her, who had dismissed her with contempt, now stood stripped of everything they thought made them untouchable. Pete Laramie stepped away from the counter, moving deliberately to stand with the customers. His voice was low, but it carried. Ma'am, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. I should have stopped them sooner. Eliza gave him a single nod, acknowledgement, not absolution, before turning back to the staff who had fallen into silence. You believe power was in titles, in cards, in terminals, she said evenly. But power has never lived in paper or plastic. It lives in truth. And now the truth has spoken. Halston's lips quivered, but no words formed. Douglas bowed his head, shame hollowing out the arrogance that had once fueled him. Andrew closed his eyes, as if wishing the ground would swallow him whole. The applause rose again, swelling louder, echoing off the marble like a verdict. It wasn't for spectacle. It was for justice. And at the center of it all stood Eliza Hart, calm, composed, and unshaken. The very image of authority they had tried to erase. The humiliation they had crafted for her had unraveled into their own undoing. Yet the moment was not finished. One final truth still waited to be spoken. The clapping lingered, refusing to fade. It carried the weight of vindication, not just for her, but for every customer who had been dismissed, for every voice that had been silenced, for every quiet humiliation that had gone unrecorded until this day. When the applause softened to a hush, Eliza stepped forward. She stood where Halston had loomed, where Douglas had sneered, where Andrew had smirked. Now the three of them stood powerless, their badges useless, their authority dissolved. Her presence filled the space not by force, but by truth undeniable. Her voice was steady, each word deliberate, carried by the stillness of the room. This bank belongs to me, she said, her gaze sweeping the lobby. Its walls, its vaults, its name, its reputation. You tried to twist them into weapons against me, but all you revealed was your own prejudice. You believed my silence meant submission. You believed my skin meant suspicion. You believed my clothing meant poverty. She paused, letting the words settle like a verdict carved in stone. And every one of those beliefs, she said finally, was your undoing. The lobby was silent, every customer holding their breath, every phone capturing her words. Daniela Rivera held her child tighter, her eyes fixed on Eliza with a mix of relief and reverence. The tide had turned completely, and no one could deny it now. Marcus Bell lowered his phone for a moment, not to stop recording, but to truly see her. His eyes widened with something deeper than admiration, pride. Around him, dozens still held their cameras high, but he wanted Eliza Hart to know he was watching not just through a lens, but as a witness who would never forget. Her phone chimed again, her assistant's voice steady and precise through the speaker. Compliance has documented the full incident. Legal review is active. A public statement draft is ready for your approval. Eliza didn't waver. Her reply was swift, her tone firm but even. Approve it. Let the truth be our defense. Halston, the regional director, lifted his head one last time. His voice trembled as he searched for an escape. Please, is there nothing we can do? Eliza's gaze cut to him, sharp yet composed. There is nothing you can undo. Every word was yours. Every action was yours. The record is permanent, and so are the consequences. Her words carried across the lobby like a final judgment, steady and undeniable. Then she turned toward the customers, her voice rising not in volume but in clarity, as if meant for both the room and every unseen audience beyond it. I do not need a camera to prove who I am. I do not need applause to confirm my dignity. I do not need silence to preserve peace. I am the result of every attempt to erase me, and I will not be erased. The eruption that followed was not chaos, but triumph. Applause shook the marble floors. Cheers rose, mingled with tears, while others simply stood in reverent silence. Phones lifted higher, documenting not just her words, but the moment itself, a reckoning that belonged to everyone who had ever been told they did not belong. Behind the counter, the staff who had once stood tall with smug certainty were now diminished shadows of themselves. Badges dead, screens locked, authority dissolved. Their downfall was complete, witnessed by all. Pete Laramie stood near the crowd now, arms folded, his head lowered slightly, as if offering respect. Daniela Rivera cradled her child against her chest, whispering softly as tears welled in her eyes. Even Graham Ellis, once smirking in his pinstripes, had dropped his gaze, his arrogance stripped bare in the weight of what he had seen. Eliza closed her laptop case with deliberate calm, lifted it from the counter, and began walking toward the exit. She didn't rush. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Her footsteps carried the certainty that the truth she had unleashed would echo long after she left the lobby. Justice had been spoken, not with shouting, but with the quiet precision of someone who never needed to raise her voice to be heard.